but also that where we're at is not, it's not the end all be all. We're all navigating through through our lives, and we can all learn, and they're learning from us. And thank God that, that we have the ability to do that, so that we give ourselves grace and time to be real and have the conversations that need to be had with them, because they're watching. They're watching,
Yeah.
they're listening, and they're learning.
Hello, welcome to a special Mother's Day episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors, where we share stories of survivorhood and thriving, and hopefully you find inspiration so that you can find your inner warrior and become survivors along with us and join the sisterhood. So I'm Tara Woodley, and I'm president of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. And my special guests today are Audrey Maltsberger. I got it, Maltsberger.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you. And Mia, I cannot say your last name. You're going to have to do it.
Yeah, Caicedo.
Thank you. And Mia is our volunteer engagement coordinator for social media, and Audrey is a board member at Break the Silence. She's our secretary on the board. So it's wonderful to have you. And you guys are just two of my favorite guests every time y'all are on. Um, so we're going to talk about some of this mother-daughter relationship as how it pertains to domestic violence. And I think it's a really good conversation to have, because a lot of times it's hard, especially as mothers who are survivors, to have these conversations with our children, and our children to be able to converse with us. So hopefully we'll give some insight on first your story and how we can help others have those conversations with their children. So let's just start with Audrey. If you can share kind of a special mother daughter memory that holds significance for you, like something that, you know, has kind of helped you in your journey with Mia, be able to have the tough conversations.
Well, I will say that I prayed for a little girl, and I'm already gonna start crying, but I really wanted a little girl. I have two boys, and they are precious and wonderful in their own ways, and they make me so proud every day. But there's something special about a little girl. And if I would have made a list of all the things that I wanted in a little girl, it was like God just checked every single thing off the list. I remember when and this was one of my favorite things about her, when she was 3 years old, and I saw her go in the kitchen, and she touched the oven to see if it was warm, opened it, and this is probably not putting me in the best light, but she climbed on the oven, and I'm standing there watching her. We watch what our children are doing, make sure. And she climbed on the counter, and even in front of the sink, balanced her way across, and she knew where all the treats were.
I believe that.
And she climbed her way across, balanced her way, and she climbed up and got the treats that she wanted. And I'm just standing there in awe, because she was able to accomplish what she wanted and make a way to get there. But I also noticed that she was not afraid of anything. And that was like a recurring theme of hers. She was the little girl that was dressed as a princess, but collecting bugs. And the boys were afraid, but she wasn't afraid. She's always had this sense of fearlessness in her. And I've admired it from her from the time that she was a little girl. And she continues to do those things, and I'm always in awe of her. She's always just fearless, and she loves fiercely. The people that she has in her life, she loves them fiercely. That's the word I meant to say, but she does, and I admire that. But I do have to share that I noticed it at a very young age that she was fearless.
Mia, would you like to share a special memory of your mom?
feel like I have so many, and it's hard to pinpoint just one memory, like, with my mom. Um, like, I've always loved my mom so much, and I feel like the first memory that I, like, realized how much I loved her was when my dad hit her, and I remember crying and crying and wanting her to come home and just not understanding why she wasn't with me, and, um,
How old were you, Mia, when that
She was 3.5.
yeah, I can't really remember anything from when I was really little. It's like I think I honestly only really remember the trauma, um, but I also remember when my mom was getting married and we went wedding dress shopping and her trying on the dresses, and I'm very opinionated, but when I she was in her dress, I was like, "You know, that's actually really pretty," and she just looked so pretty, and I remember being such a brat that she that she made me her maid of honor because I wanted to do it, and I was very offended by the fact that she said her sister was gonna do it at first.
She was my Mia of honor.
I was, and yeah.
So how was that? Like, let's touch on that since you brought up that subject. What was it like for you, Mia, to have another man enter in the relationship after you guys had suffered abuse and your mom's getting married to someone new? Like, what kind of feelings were you having during that time?
I fought him. I, like, physically harmed him because I was so scared that he was gonna end up hurting my mom, so I literally did everything in my power to keep him away. Like, every time they would hug, I would literally, like, dig my nails into him to get him to go away. He never he never went away. He did do a lot
Yeah.
of,
Work.
he bribed my love with hot Cheetos when I was little. Every time I saw him and a bag of hot Cheetos, and I was like, "Okay, maybe he's not so bad." But it did take, like, a year. It took a long time for me to, like, start warming up.
We dated for 4.5 years before we got married, but and bribe it I mean, it sounds like such a bad thing, but he really learned her love language is what he did.
Yeah, that's what it is. Uh-huh.
And I do wanna be honest and say at the beginning, because I understood Mia and I understood why she was so protective of me because I had been hurt and she was, she was even though she was so little, she was willing to stand in front of me. And that's something that is a theme with Mia. Like she is fear like I said, she loves fiercely. But I would feel it was kind of worrisome because I was afraid that, that they weren't gonna that wasn't gonna work out, but honestly, it was not until I stepped back and let the 2 of them work out the kinks in their relationship. I had to trust that if he was the right person for me, then he was going to have to do the work to make her feel, to have peace about the relationship and move forward. So there was a lot of work on Daryl's part, and he did learn her love language, and she did love hot Cheetos, but it was more than that. It was spending time with with him. I have a picture and it's hilarious, but it was one like when we were dating before it was serious and I was actually allowing him to spend time with my children, and we're at like a main event, and I have a picture that I snapped and she's like this. She is letting me know how not happy she was. But all that to say, they did the work. I had to step out and let them do it, but he did win her over, and
Mhm,
thank God, because she not only did I need that kind of relationship, he restored my faith in men, but she needed that kind of relationship too. And so now, they have their own little, language and everything like that, but it did take some work for her
mhm.
and him.
But in, like, the similar time that my mom started dating, other people, my dad did too, And, um, I just I never like, he just had it ingrained in his mind that I didn't like her and that I was trying to ruin their relationship, and so every time they ever had a problem, it was always my fault, and I was the barrier in him being happy and him finding love, but anytime my mom and her husband did break up a few times, but it was never, like, my fault, but every time my dad had a problem, it was my fault. So it helps for me to see that when Daryl and my mom were having issues, it was never my fault.
Right.
And it made me trust him a little bit more because I was never blamed for anything.
No, that's a good thing. And in those moments, Audrey, like, were there conversations with Mia? Like, what did you say to her in those moments where her father, her biological father, is blaming her?
We look back, we learn looking back. When in those situations, you're really just leaning it like for me, it was my faith. It was my instinct. It was like listening to the voice of reason within me and being able to sit down and talk to her and understand that I understood why she was having a hard time. I understood, but allowing her the opportunity to be heard, that was really hard because I think as mothers, we identify that there are some things like Mia's a lot like me, but there are some things that she's like, I mean, there's two people and that make up a child. And there are some, things that she does that might be like her dad, but it's allowing her to react in the way or to have the interest that she has and just meeting her there. Being okay with if, I handle my grief, I handle my, stress in a certain way, allowing her to be independently who she is, regardless of how she's reacting, if it's similar to someone else, giving her the opportunity to be heard and seen and just loving her more for her unique qualities. It was tough having those conversations because you have to be okay to hear when your child is not happy with you. I knew that she had valid reasons of why she was upset with me. And I had to be able to have the tough conversations with her and not impose like my reactions to that, but allow her to be heard. And, kids when they're growing up, they make choices that we might not agree with, but just allowing her to make those choices and still love her through them is what brought us closer. Because she had reason to be angry with me. I was a factor in her pain. I had to let her tell me about it and receive it and understand her and not get angry with her, and that's hard to do, but I
Mhm.
honestly believe that that brought us closer.
It did take a while for it to bring us closer
Mhm.
because, not to shame my mom at all, but there was, like, a little bit of victim blaming, like, with my mom. Like, she'd be like, "Well, you don't do things that you know is gonna make him mad, like, you need to, like, walk on eggshells around him," and I hadn't fully, like, grasped that yet. Like, in my mind, he was still my dad, and he was still the man who loved me no matter what, but he wasn't. And so when she would be like, "Well, you shouldn't have done that," I'm like, because, like, I understand it, but she was still processing through her pain too, and she was always, "Well, maybe I shouldn't have done this, and maybe I shouldn't have done that." I think now we're both at the point where we're like, there's nothing that we can do that would warrant any kind of
Right.
responses that he ever had, because his responses were never like, my dad is terrifying. Like, when he's angry, he's one of the scariest people ever, and that's so sad for me to say it because he's my dad.
It's okay, Mia. But you had to process that on your own. It's something that I think each child, when they have to go through that, they have to process in the fact that you want to feel like you're unique to that parent in a special way, that this would not happen to you. And that's just part of the process of being young, especially when you're close to a particular parent. And sometimes, children, it takes maturity to realize that our parents are just people too. They have all the flaws, they have all the mistakes, they are not perfection, and that they're people too, and sometimes they're not so good at people, and having to realize that is just a part of the process.
Yeah. Like I would go to my mom to like talk about the things, but I wouldn't always listen to her on the advice she gave because it was like she was talking from an outside perspective. Because I
Mhm.
left, like she left and I didn't. I was still stuck there. And so when she would like talk about it, I'm like, you don't even understand because you're not there.
Right.
I feel like,
I wasn't there anymore.
yeah, she wasn't there anymore.
Was there resentment because I wasn't
There
there?
was. I think I'm gonna be honest, I think my brothers still have resentment sometimes, and I think I do some, and honestly, they probably have resentment towards me sometimes because I left too. He's blocked, and they always hear things about me from my dad. And like I'm not involved in my dad's life at all, so I don't know why it is like that, but it is like that. And they are upset about it sometimes, and it sucks because he's like a dumpster fire lighting other things on fire in my life. Even when he's a mile away, he still manages to affect my life, and it sucks.
Yeah. So, wow, that's kind of enlightening, isn't it, Audrey? Because me as a mother thinking, I hadn't even thought in terms of, you think when you leave, you got your children out of it, but no, if part of them is still in it. And I never thought about aspects of like resentment because they still have a certain foot in the door that they have to deal with that.
It's
Um,
really heartbreaking to like Mia said, I'm out of it and I've been out of it and I've, had to establish some very healthy boundaries for myself in order for me to move on without the fire, affecting me anymore. But the sad thing is, like she said, that, sometimes the boys, are still affected even all of these years later, like it still just happened and they're grown. And
mhm.
to see them still hurting hurts me because I feel so responsible. Like it was me staying for as long as I did, and I'll ultimately have to forgive myself because I did what I could at the time. And and we as mothers would never intentionally hurt our children, but we
Mhm.
do what we have to do to survive. And I have to forgive myself. I have to let them, I need them to forgive me in their own timing, but I understand why there's resentment there. I honestly understand why they could still potentially be angry at me is because they have to continually deal with the fire and the pain that is caused by having that open relationship. And and it's really sad that they have to learn it for themselves too. And it takes time. But if we can just remind ourselves that we have to give them the time to learn, because I think Mia, when she was younger, she probably didn't understand, why I was, and me telling her, you know, don't do this, it was telling her, I was trying to equip her with, we have to pick and choose our battles of how we respond and when we engage. And that was miscommunicated. I didn't have the right tools to say, well, this is how he is, and this is what is going to trigger him. And so it's not necessarily me telling her walk on eggshells. It's me telling her this is how he handles things. And like we have to learn where our safety lies. And I feel horrible that my children are continually hurt by a decision that I made. That continually breaks my heart. you know, even as grown men that they are, to see them hurting by a parent that I, you know, was in a relationship with, it still hurts my heart for them.
Yes, Mia, you had a thought. I saw you raise your hand.
I don't understand why you're saying that we're affected by a decision that you made.
I married him.
Okay? We wouldn't be here if she didn't marry him. At the end of the day, the person who made the decisions to harm us is my dad, and there's nothing she
Mhm.
could have done to save us from that. So that stop, don't
I think I needed to hear
It's
that.
hard to let go of that, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's hard as a parent to, but like Mia, what was the things that helped you to overcome that resentment? Whether it was something you did or your mom did, like what advice would you give somebody else who's struggling with that kind of resentment?
Honestly, I honestly really don't know. Like,
Hmm.
for a while I had resentment towards her because he would go on and on about how much he hated her and hated all the things about her and then look at me and tell me that I was just like her, and that's what like that's something that upset him. But as I got older, he didn't bring her up as much. He brought up things about me.
Right,
So I started realizing she wasn't the problem, that he was. And as I started getting over my pain, I realized that's not her fault that he didn't get over his pain, and it's not her fault that he brought his pain over to me. And it's
right,
not my fault he brought his pain over to me. And it's no one's fault that he brought his pain over. It's his fault that he doesn't make the decision to heal. And that's honestly, it's so sad that he can't make that decision for himself and that he has so many blessings in his life that he pushes away because he can't heal. And he doesn't I don't think he always understands that he's continuing the cycle that started when he was little.
right.
Like it's not his fault that he went through the things that he did, but it's his fault that he made the decisions that he did to
Mhm.
continue it.
What saddens me is that he's in so much pain that he's missing out on this beautiful child. That's that's what hurts my heart, is that sometimes our pain robs us in ways that we don't even realize because we feel that pain so greatly. And I just look at my children and I think they're the most incredible human beings. I say it all the time. I say I want to be like Mia when I grow up because she's found her voice so early and she helps other people. And I just feel like it's an example of how, you know, when we can identify it and work through it, we let go of the pain that could continuously rob us. And it hurts my heart for people that can't let go, you know, because they're just robbing themselves of joy, of time that you can't time is something that you can't get back. And I'm thankful that the steps that we took have led us to today. I'm thankful with where I am with my children. I'm so proud of them. And my boys are incredible men. And that makes me so proud because I know how hard it must have been for them to experience what they did and still fight to break that and have, you know, relationships with, you know, they're both in beautiful relationships with women, and I'm so proud of them. And then to have this beautiful young girl that will not settle. She is, I, you know, the man that comes, you know, to ask for her heart.
I have my eye on one. Um, but
Oh,
But the man that comes to ask for her heart, I know with all of mine that he'll be a good man
I think
because she knows what's right. She
yeah,
sees it.
one thing that helped me heal that my mom told me is because she obviously had anger for a while too. And she told me that she was just praying to God and she was like, help me see him the way that you see him.
We're a bunch of crybabies.
Yeah, we are.
Well, that's powerful, isn't it?
Healing.
Carried.
It's healing.
Yeah, but it carried on from you. Thank you. But she asked to see him the way that God sees him, and she said that she saw a little boy that just wanted to be loved. And it breaks my heart for him
Right.
because I was the little girl that wanted to be loved. And so I know like how he feels, how it feels to like be mistreated and feel like you're not loved by your parents. But what makes me feel even worse for him is that he can't get over it. I have to get over it, and that because he can't, that I can't have him in my life. And he's my dad and I miss him.
Yeah, but the thing is that you're doing the work to break the cycle.
Amen.
You're doing the work. So, and opening your heart out there so that other people can break that cycle so they don't have to, experience the kind of things that you're experiencing. That maybe someday he'll find some healing. We'll leave that to Jesus, won't we, Audrey?
I've never stopped praying for him. And we've seen God work in his life. I mean, we've seen God firsthand work in his life. It's just a matter of him seeing it. And we have hope and we pray, and it's never too late. But for me, I'm proud of her for establishing those healthy boundaries for herself, because she's not going to be hurt. She's not going to allow anybody to hurt her. It took her time, but she got there. And I think that's what we need, is time. It takes time to learn the lessons. It takes time to see the mistakes that you've made, and to learn from them so that you don't make mistakes moving forward.
And I always
Right.
mention that he's still my dad because I know that there's other kids out there who moms and dads, doesn't matter who the abusive partner is, they both end up talking about each other. And at the end of the day, the child still has to hear all the horrible things about the person who helped make them. And that's half of me. And so I know how hard it is. It's hard, for a lot of victims to leave their husbands or leave their wives. But you never leave your parent. So
Right.
it's harder. And I feel like if it would have been in a boyfriend, it would have been a lot easier for me. But because it's my dad, it's I'm getting over it, but it's always gonna hurt. It might not hurt as bad, but I always feel it. And like I have some traits of his and it bothers me, but it's so hard to control them sometimes because I'm definitely when I'm angry, I'm on a warpath, and I take that warpath up to my room and do not spew any of the hate that I feel out.
She recognizes her red flags, which is
Yeah,
good. You
yeah.
have to.
I try my best to take control of my emotions, but at the end of the day, I'm 20, I'm still growing up. I'm still processing through, and because I spent so much of my life getting trauma dumped on by my parents that I couldn't, it was too hard for me to process my feelings on top of theirs.
Right.
So now I still have to process through the things that I felt, and sometimes they pop up unexpectedly. Like when I'm washing the dishes and all of a sudden I hear my dad's voice telling me that no one's gonna love me because I don't wash the dishes right. Or telling me, or that I had to realize when my parents are telling me to clean something that they're not angry with me and they're not gonna come yell at me By my parents, I mean my mom and my stepdad. They're my parents, but it's all like, I had to, like, rewire my brain sometimes because my stepdad, his love language is words of affirmation. So he'll, like, say things like, "Aren't you glad I got you this?" Because he wants to hear, "Thank you." But in my mind, I think of my dad and how he used it against me. Like, no matter what, like, he could buy me a bag of chips, and he'd be like, "Remember when I bought you a bag of chips?
Right.
Like, you didn't deserve the bag of chips." And so every time someone, like, gets me something, I feel guilty, and I struggle a lot with things like that. And it's really hard to pull yourself out of that place, and it's so hard to think you're out of that place, and all of a sudden the memories come back up.
Yeah. And you rely on your mom when that happens?
Sometimes. Yeah,
Yes.
I do.
I do want to say, like, I feel like we put so much pressure. I mean, and I could say that a lot of is the pressure because of social media where we paint this picture and everything has to be, you have to have a certain car and you have to make so much money and you have to do this or you're not someone perfect in the world or whatever. You know, we're proof that you can go through something terrible and that's not the end of your story. You know, like there was a time where she probably couldn't stand me and and you know, and there was a time where I was extremely concerned about her because of the choices that she was making. But we need time. We need to give each other time and and extend forgiveness, obviously, but you know, be gracious to one another because where we're at right now is just part of it, you know, like there's no pressure to get to, okay, you need to be here, you know, you should have already grieved, you should already, there's no time limit. And I will say that parenting Mia, I've learned a lot from her and the way that she processes that is not like me. And I can't expect her to be like me because she's
Mm,
not. And I think that because, and this is just my opinion, but sometimes as moms, we put so much pressure on them that we don't even realize that in that pressure, we're robbing them of the time that they need to process, you know,
mhm,
because we're like, our job is to protect them, to feed them and clothe them and all of that. But more than that, we want them to be okay. But we have to give them the time to get there without pressuring them or reacting to sometimes the way that they react because they are part of their other parent and
mhm.
just loving them for who they are uniquely versus allowing the cycle to repeat even though you broke it, but allowing their pain to continue because you're expecting them to be a certain way that they're not. Does that make any sense?
Mhm.
Yes.
I wanna mention something because she mentioned, like, people wanting to live picture perfect lives, and, I know a lot of parents don't leave their abusive partners because they don't wanna ruin their child's life by leaving and their family falling apart. Your child's gonna be okay if you leave. They're gonna be okay if they end up in a domestic violence shelter. They're gonna be okay if they have to live in an apartment and share out the room for a while. They're gonna be okay through that.
Yeah.
They're not gonna be they're not gonna be okay if they see their parents fighting every day and they think that's the healthy way of love and they can repeat the cycle.
Hmm.
They're not
Right.
gonna be okay if you ignore their feelings about the things. I feel like you need to be kinder to yourself and realize that staying isn't gonna make everything better, and leaving isn't gonna ruin everything
That's
either.
right. It's just a season. It's just there's not the end of the story. There's
And it
more.
doesn't matter if it takes you 5 years to rebuild your life. As long as you rebuild it, it'll be fine.
Hmm.
And at least if you leave, your child will have a better chance of
Hmm.
not repeating that cycle. Yeah, I think parents do need to be a little more lenient, especially when your partner's abusive and if your child has to visit them. Like, cause I know I was a mess after I would visit my dad, and my mom would probably want to rip her hair out because we were just little.
It was a transition period when they would go spend time and
Yeah.
then they would come back. They needed time to debrief, like they needed time to process through. It was always like a period of adjustment for them where they might have been a little heightened in their attitude or, maybe a little sassy and I would just, kind of look the other way and I understood because we're so very different and my rules are different, my expectations are different. And, I can't imagine having to go back and forth and be in the middle and then be pressured to kind of just jump back in the routine the way that it's supposed to go. They need time to transition and they need to be able to be heard, even if
Yes.
there's some sass, we just
I
have to let them be heard, and that's hard.
I also want to mention, I'm sorry, but I feel like a lot of people will think that just because like the abuser has children now that the abuse isn't going to carry over because that's their child, not just their partner. My mom and I have talked about this. Like, she thought that maybe I was going to be the person to help heal my dad and his relationships with women, and that the his feelings towards her wouldn't carry over, but a lot of the time they do. So,
Mhm.
I'd say when you start seeing those warning signs, don't dismiss it. Like,
Right.
unfortunately, most of the time it carries over. And yeah, I'd also like there's so many like I think there was a lot of warning signs like with me. And because I still had to see him even after those warning signs were there, like I started self-harming, and I would say don't dismiss that because for a lot of people it ends up getting a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of resources out there, so I definitely use those and don't be ashamed that your child is going through something. Sometimes you can't prevent the situations that they go through. All you could do is support them through it. And sometimes getting help and getting in uncomfortable positions is what heals them. I would also say the warning signs for like substance and alcohol abuse, because if that's in the home, it crosses over with
Very
a
high
lot of
chance.
domestic violence relationships. Yeah, I'd be very careful with that too. I think a lot of these things can be prevented because there's a lot of different kinds of therapies and now. So,
Well, that was one of the best things that when I finally left and, like Mia said, it's not the end of the world when you have to leave and you go to a shelter or, you end up in an apartment and you're starting all over. That's actually the best thing because I think that it brought us closer together, but it also helped me. I needed somebody to tell me what to do, but going and putting them in group counseling and individual counseling and all of that family counseling, I think that that gave us all an opportunity to process through and learn the tools that we needed. Now, I will say it took time for us to use the tools that they gave us, but I mean, going to therapy it changed the trajectory of our lives.
So therapy was like really helpful for both of you.
Absolutely. I was in therapy for 8 years, but aside from all of, including this, I was in therapy before this, but it took a long time for me to be able to use the tools that I was learning. And I
honestly,
also learned through them.
honestly, I don't even remember going through that much therapy, but I think
She was little.
therapy doesn't have to be going to a therapist. Therapy can be talking to your mom for a few hours and your mom letting you talk and just hear you and hug you when you cry. It's not just chairs. How do you feel about that?
She was really little. So did she go separately or did you both go together? You did a little bit of both or?
We had family, so it was me and the kids. We had group, so it was them and their peers, and then it was individual. So, and she was little. She did She did play therapy. The boys, they also had individual counseling. But ultimately for me, I had to get sober because I, I was blaming myself and carrying grief of the decisions that I made for so long that it was hard for me to move past the pain that I continued to see in them.
Mhm.
I had to get sober so that I could allow myself to help them because I wasn't making it better. I wasn't using the tools that were given to me. I was spiraling in my own way. And so once I was able to do that, it was it was the best thing that I could have done for them.
I never went down the track of, like, substance abuse, like, that kinda addiction, but I self-harm was definitely addiction for me, and I struggled from when I was 10 till when I was 18. So but
Yeah.
I'm also sober, and I'm also, like, over 900 days clean from self-harm. So
Yay! That's wonderful. So, what was that like, kinda sharing that experience as mother and daughter, knowing that part of what she was doing was self-harming herself, trying to, cope with her grief and trauma and everything?
It was so hard for me to see her like I couldn't wrap my brain around why she was hurting herself. It was really, really hard for me. But I will say that there was one thing that I did understand, and it was because I was coping, before I got sober, I was coping in the way that I could. And it was a horrible way of coping because I was drinking and, I was, anxious and taking anxiety medication, but I was using it in excess. And so once I was able to get sober and I saw that I understood, but I couldn't help her. I had to allow her to I had to allow her to make the decision to stop the way that I did. And it was really hard because I felt so guilty because I felt responsible for her pain. So
Mhm.
really difficult to navigate that. I constantly told her how much I loved her and I constantly, just tried to be there for her and understand and walk with her through her pain, but I also feel like I failed her in so many areas.
she never failed me.
I felt responsible.
Well, it's hard not to feel responsible when that happens with your child and what they're going through. Yeah, because I know my youngest did that kind of thing as well. And for a long time, I felt responsible as well. But part of in our conversation we were having, she was numbing herself through some of her pain, and this was just her own. I mean, Mia, you can chime in what it was for you, but for her, I remember her telling me, I just wanted to be sure I still felt something, because she had been numbing it down and suppressing it down. That was the only time she ever felt like something, and she felt like she could control it. It was a method of controlling her pain. And she was kind of utilizing it for that for a while until she got through that. But Mia, you want to talk about that a little bit, like for you?
For me, I wasn't numb. I felt everything. I felt it way too much. It was more I think I was hurting so much, but I thought in my mind I thought I was hurting less than I deserved. So me
Mhm.
harming was giving myself the pain that I thought that I was channeling all the words that were said to me and all the ways that I felt into pain. And I definitely took it to an extreme, and I have scars that I know are never gonna go away. Um, but I wanna go back and touch on that my mom feels that she failed because she didn't. And I I always tell her that if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here, and that's not just because she gave birth to me, that's because when I I'm clean from self-harm, but I still sometimes I have thoughts of it'd be better if I wasn't here, and every
Mhm.
time I think of that, I think of my mom, and I think about how much pain it would cause her, and I could never do that to her.
It's crazy that she said that she says that, because there were multiple times when I was in the relationship that I was literally sitting. I can remember a time when I was sitting on the bathroom floor and I had just had enough of the fighting and enough of the just enough of dealing with that kind of relationship and the abuse and just feeling like I just was worthless. And there was a moment of weakness when I was just sitting on the floor with a bottle of pills because I just felt like I was failing. And so, and her little fingers reached under the door, and she was little, she was like 2, and her little fingers just reached under the door, and I know that that was a moment that, I mean, she saved my life. All of my kids, they saved me. I needed her, and I needed them as much as they needed me, and my biggest fear, that was a moment of weakness, but my biggest fear was that they would grow up without me, because I was threatened that, that he would take my life, and my biggest fear was that they would grow up not loved, and that's what stayed. But they have saved my life multiple times, multiple times over, and I'm thankful I'm still here because of them.
My brothers and I can get mad and we could say, like, a lot of things, of rude things about her, but we can never say that she doesn't love us because she does. And she shows my mom is like a bright light for love.
Oh, that's the sweetest thing, Audrey. That is that's beautiful.
Like when my mom talks to you, you can tell that she has like a pure heart and she means every single word that she says. And so
Mhm.
when anyone who's friends with her knows that she has so much love and that like she's the kind of person that you need in the world. And I feel like if everyone had moms like my mom, then everyone would be happy and have like perfect lives. And not I didn't have a perfect life even though I have my mom. But
She's the perfect mom for you.
mom, yeah.
She
Yeah.
I'm and she's the perfect daughter for me, and my boys are perfect for me. I say it all the time. God knew what he was doing when he blessed me with these children, because I would not have gotten through the things that I went through in my life without them. And I was a young mama. I was I had my oldest at 19, and then
28.
the two younger ones, and I grew up with them. And the sad thing is, like, I feel like sometimes as moms and survivors, like, it's not even about us, it's about them. It's
Right.
about all of the things that we need to do, and it's not even, I could never have done it for myself. So God gave me them so that I could do it for them, because it took me a long time to be able to do something for me.
I don't think it's just about you or it's just about the kids. It's about us. It's about both of us. Because at the end of the day, the kids survive it too, and you're both survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people don't like to say the word victims, but we are the victims. We
Mhm.
all experience something that we
I don't
shouldn't
like the
have
word
to.
victim. We're survivors. We are thrivers now.
I think I don't
No, you both are warriors now. You're in that classification.
such a negative
I don't like it.
connotation. I think we went through something that we shouldn't have to experience.
Yeah. It's okay. At some point, we're all victims somewhere, somehow. I mean, if you're a victim of a robbery, it's okay to own that, but to remain in the aftermath of the trauma that the robbery created. We don't ever want to do that, right? So, yeah.
Join us. We have gotten through so much, and I'm so proud of them.
I just want to also mention, notice how she says me and boys. I think it's very obvious that she has a favorite child, and
She's hold up. Hold up.
we just balance each other so
We have to
well.
be real right now because she is constantly telling the boys, well, it's because I'm the favorite child. And I always tell her, you're my favorite daughter because I only have one daughter.
Exactly. She only has one daughter. She has two
Mhm.
boys, so she can't have a favorite there. So they're kind of down here. No, no, no. But
I love my boys and I love them all equally. And I cannot mention her without praising my boys because I am extremely proud of them too, especially for overcoming everything that they've overcome with me.
Right.
And that they still love me and that they're just incredible humans that are just such a source of strength and light in the world. I'm so proud of them.
But my mom and I like we balance each other out like perfectly. Like
Yes.
she's so nice, and like sometimes people can walk over her and I'm like her protector. Like if anyone's ever mean to her, I'm ready. Like I'm like behind her. I'm like, huh? What'd you say?
I
Not
hear you.
today.
She is, like I said at the beginning of this, when the memory that I shared of her being 3 years old or 2 years old and walking across in the kitchen and balancing herself and knowing the direction and going for what she wanted, she is still that little girl all grown up, and I have so much to admire about that because I wasn't that person. I didn't find my voice. I was 40 before I even, was able to see clearly. There was just so much I admire so much in each of my children, and to be able to do that for them that speaks volumes of the ability for kids to, that they're resilient and that they can overcome, but they also need somebody leading the way. And it's a challenge for us as survivors to be the one that leads them out,
Mhm.
and then go back in and help others out. So
Yes. Awesome. Well, unless you guys have anything else you want to add real quick before we end the podcast.
That's something
she
else.
always has something.
Yeah, I forgot it though.
I know she has to have the last word whenever she's on.
And I let her, baby, yeah, I always I let her speak because there's so much to learn and so much wisdom and
I know her little Mia isms. That's what I call them.
Mia, oh, that's so
Yes.
sweet. I love that. I can write that down. That's so good. But for someone so young, she's
Mhm.
very wise. Sometimes she's talking and I'm just like, oh my gosh, who is this child? Well, she's not a child. Who is this woman? I can't even say woman because she's my baby.
Um, what I want to add is, like, it's okay for your kids to see you cry because it makes the kid realize that their emotions are okay to feel. I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of survivors want to hide that part of the healing from their kids. They don't want to see them cry and know that they're
Mm,
hurting, but you don't have to hurt alone.
that's right.
Your kids can see you hurt and y'all could hurt together because I guarantee you that they're hurting too.
Yeah,
And just because they don't see it doesn't mean that they don't feel it.
Right.
that's so good.
Thanks.
But that's so good. We feel like we have to hold it together and make sure, like we're just trying to get them through the day and make sure they're at school and they're fed and they're clothed and you took a shower and you did your homework and and you forget that, like Mia says, we are human, like we do feel and we do have to process. And I think that that's really good advice, is that we allow ourselves to feel what we're feeling without having to hide it, because we don't want them to hide it, because what happens,
I'm a prime
in
example of what happens when you hide it. because
Mhm.
I channeled it for way too long, to the point where I was enduring more pain than I didn't have to on top of everything else. Um,
Right. Oh, I'm so proud of you both for coming on and talking about this with me. Thank you so
I think it's
much.
so easy to
Yeah.
talk to. Like we're just having a conversation
and crying.
and crying, but we can literally speak and be ourselves without having to, I think we need more,
Mhm.
more, we need more opportunities to be able to talk about the things that, are tough. But also that
Absolutely.
where we're at is not, it's not the end all be all. We're all navigating through our lives, and we can all learn, and they're learning from us, and thank God that, that we
Yeah.
have the ability to do that, so that we give ourselves grace and time to be real and have the conversations that need to be had with them, because they're watching. They're watching,
Yeah.
they're listening, and they're learning.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to have those like tough conversations. What?
I'm just
Yeah,
listening.
don't be afraid to have those tough conversations, because if you don't have them with your child, someone else is going to, or
That's
they're
right.
going to experience and have to learn the hard way.
Mm,
So having the tough conversations can save your child from experiencing it, or when they do, that they'll know how to handle it better.
right.
Just because hiding things from your child doesn't make it go away.
Right.
It grows.
Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right. Thank you. And this ends our episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. Please check out our website, www.breakthesilencedv.org. We have a store, get some great merchandise. We even have our Through the Eyes of Survivors merchandise. So check that out. It's beautiful. You'll love it. So, and every dime that you spend helps support all the programs that we have for victims and survivors of domestic violence. So we thank you, and we'll see you next episode.